Ooh.
And astonishing goal. That's the way to do it. Herrera, Ibrahimovic! With 3.5 minutes to play. Now Di Maria wants it back, gets it back. Fantastic!
That's the luck of the bounce off Gaston Ramirez. Top try! What a day this is turning out to be for Manchester United!
Mason Greenwood hits the spot.
In he goes towards Muriel. What a save, David De Gea. Brilliant save.
Quarterback shooting, quarterback on it. Martial comes in brilliantly. And James, dream debut. Daniel James.
Hello and welcome back to a slightly different episode of the United Devils podcast. Obviously, with football suspended, there's not really much to talk about, so we thought we'd go for something different this week, and we'll instead be looking at a combined 11 of the most overrated players in the Premier League, and this will be just going on a bit of a price tag and just how fans and pundits talk about these players and whether their praise is actually deserved. With me today, welcome back, Arion. And first of all, we should just probably say, how is everything in America?
Yeah, it's kind of getting a little hectic now. Like we were just saying before we started recording, people do love a panic once it all sets in and the government gets involved and the shelves in the shops are empty, the streets are empty, and everybody's kind of just like overwhelmed with everything because we don't really know much and what to expect and how long this will take. So yeah, a bit of a panic, and people actually seem to be following the advice over here and staying inside, which is a good thing. Hopefully that kind of helps.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is imperative that people do stay in and do make sure that they have minimal contact with people outside your family or your close families, certainly. Just keep washing your hands, keep the distances if necessary. And if you are ill, please stay away from other people, that kind of thing. And it's important that people follow those rules. And now, even in the UK, they've had like a regulation on shopping as well. Just go out just for a little bit, minimal shopping, just the bare necessities, that kind of stuff. So hopefully the shops will then get all their stock back of toilet roll and eggs and beer and whatever else is just being hoarded away at the moment. So fingers crossed this is not for long, but you can never really tell because this is such an unprecedented event.
Yeah, it makes you think with all the toilet paper going off the shelves, what were people doing before all this all started?
Yeah, it's just a bit bizarre, really. Yeah, it's just sort of transformed the whole world into just sort of alarm bells and just rushing around and getting everything they can just in case there is like a global apocalypse or something. But should we just dive straight into it? So we'll start with for this, we're going to be factoring in, like I said, price tag and whether their praise is actually warranting from their performance. So we'll just
this season or overall?
Bit of both really, but more towards sort of this season.
Okay.
And we can start with a goalkeeper before we even need to consider a formation. But goalkeeper first. Do you have any idea of who you'd consider in that mix?
I was actually thinking about it just there, and a name that kind of popped into my head was Ederson from City, because it feels like, and I'm not saying he's a bad goalkeeper at all, but it feels to me like he never gets faulted in the press at all for any sort of mistakes. And obviously his defense isn't ideal because City have been going through those defensive issues, but it just feels to me like he's very good with his feet, but he does make quite a lot of howlers for a goalkeeper who was kind of even dubbed as the best keeper in the world at one point last season, because people do love a hype train. and it just seems to me like he has quite a few mistakes in him, and other than being like their third center back and being able to play out from the back, I just don't think he's as kind of reassuring as he could be for his defenders.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that on a similar level to Hugo Lloris, who similarly doesn't get criticism when you think about the 3 or 4 mistakes he made in the last 2 matches that Tottenham played and cost them some sort of big points, really, and knocked them out of the Champions League in that sense against Leipzig. But Ederson really didn't get any criticism, really, any long-standing criticism for that United game. Even the United game in December, he made a pretty bad error for Martial's goal then, because it was a pretty weak shot from his left foot, and didn't save it at his near post. And United went 2-0 up as well. So it is interesting how he doesn't get criticism for that. But do you not think that he's sort of warranted it with the number of kind of other performances he's had? Or do you think that he's sort of under the same belt as Lloris and even Jordan Pickford and Leno, who do make serious mistakes but are just sort of go under the radar a bit? Whereas you think when you consider like David De Gea, or he gets criticised for it, and Kepa as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to bring up, that if you think that anybody has earned the warrant to be laid off the criticism a little bit over time, and their reputation would be De Gea. And he gets literally no slack. As soon as he makes a mistake, the whole world is on him, like fans, media, everybody. And like people are now saying this season, even United fans, that they would just sell him in the summer and bring Henderson in. So you kind of see how quickly the tide can change. So I don't think you can really earn that much, especially as a goalkeeper. Like you could see Manuel Neuer was like the best keeper ever, arguably 2 seasons ago, and now he's not in the headlines whatsoever because he just hasn't been kind of at that level that he built himself up to be. So I think that's the tough part about being a goalkeeper, because once you start making mistakes, and like I've said before on here, that it's the toughest position in sports, because if you make one mistake, then there's nobody to clean it up behind you. So it's tough. It's a tough life being a goalkeeper, but I feel like De Gea is one of those keepers that would have earned it, and like nobody right now will look at him after the past couple of seasons and say he's a bad keeper. But then things can change quickly, like you mentioned with Kepa, who came to Chelsea as the most expensive goalkeeper in history, and now he's kind of struggling to get into the team because he just hasn't been. I don't know if you want to say live up to the hype, because I just don't feel like there was that much hype around him when Chelsea signed him. It's just the kind of just the way the new market is these days, the inflation, that they had to pay that much for a goalkeeper with some sort of promise. But people didn't really give him too much time at all to kind of adapt to English football and stuff. He started making mistakes, and he got dropped for Willy Caballero, who's not not prone to mistakes himself. He makes quite a few blunders too, but it just kind of shows you how quickly life can come at a goalkeeper.
No, for 100%. It sort of feels almost unfair with criticising goalkeepers, because they are literally the last line of defence. So if something does go wrong, it really shows. So it does seem unfair. But should we come to a conclusion? Do you think Ederson is the final one, or do you think it could even be Kepa, couldn't it?
Yeah, for me, it would come down to Ederson and Kepa. I think Lloris, I do agree with you that especially recently, he has been more prone to making mistakes, but I feel like he's maybe a level above that in terms of consistency, because we've seen him in the Premier League for so long, and he's built a name as one of the top goalkeepers, whereas the other two are still kind of trying to. So this isn't saying that they won't blossom like De Gea did after his first season or two, but right now I feel like the price tags that they came with and the hype, I think it would be between Ederson and Kepa for me, and I'll let you have the final vote.
Okay. Well, I think I'll say that because Ederson's price tag was half Kepa's. Kepa was sort of bought to replace Courtois whereas Ederson was bought to replace Bravo and did it quite well, whereas Courtois is probably more missed at Chelsea than he was sort of wishing to be at Real Madrid. So I think I'm going to go for Kepa in that 11. Should we start with the back four then? So right back. Anyone you had in mind from the beginning?
I want to throw one of our own under the bus and say that Diogo Dalot might be one of the most overrated young players that has come around in recent time, because of I remember when we were signing him, he was named the best in the world under 19, I think, or under 20, and he just hasn't shown me really anything in terms of promise for the future. Or his crossing is okay, but I still feel like that's a little bit overhyped, because I don't think he has any assists from whipping balls in from the wide flanks, which was kind of what he was brought in for. Now we're kind of, as a fan base, thinking that he might be better as a winger instead of a right back, and with how Wan-Bissaka has been playing and developing, I just don't see a way back into the team for him unless there's an injury, which, touch wood, we hope that there isn't going to be. So it might be a bit of an underwhelming response because he's not a regular, but from us, from a United fan perspective that we watch pretty much every game and see, I just don't think that there's all that in there, and I feel like he might get lost in somewhere in the depths of our squad as years go by, unless he has some sort of a rapid development spike.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I think he has, as you said, I think he's only got 2 assists total for Manchester United, and one of them was that one cross towards Fellaini in the Derby game, if you might remember.
Yep.
But yeah, he's not really. Injuries have really kind of ruined his first season, ruined his second season too. He's barely played, which has sort of allowed Wan-Bissaka to not really get enough rest at times as well. The fact that Brandon Williams is a right-footed left back has sort of meant that he could also do a job there where Dalot could not when he was been injured or something, and the fact that he's not really been able to defend kind of consistently at all really has put his place in jeopardy, where you think when you've got Wan-Bissaka on one side of the spectrum and Dalot sort of reaching towards the kind of the more attacking side, it is quite an interesting comparison. So yeah, I can understand Dalot, but I'm going to throw another player into the mix. I'm going to throw in another Manchester City player, João Cancelo, who came to Manchester City for £60 million and has found himself for most of the season being below Kyle Walker in the mix, and playing kind of sub games, playing in the cup games, and when Walker's been injured, but not really kind of impressing. He's got very few assists, very few goal contributions as well, despite fullbacks being an important part of Pep's plans. So I just think that, and even then, he's been linked with moves away. So I do see him being kind of relatively overrated, despite kind of coming from Juventus. In fact, he hasn't even registered a goal or assist in the Premier League, and has only actually played 11 games.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there, and it's definitely a bigger kind of magnitude of a player than Dalot is, because Dalot is still kind of one of those prospects and a young player, whereas Cancelo, at one point, I think there was rumors linking him with us, like what player hasn't been. But I think in the last couple of seasons, and I was actually kind of enticed at the prospect because he looked really good for Juventus and Valencia beforehand. So I really thought that he could bring something, and he's one of those kind of flary go forward fullbacks and not one of those classic defensive ones. So yeah, that's actually a pretty good shout. And with the price tag, you would have probably hoped as a City fan that he would come in and make some sort of an impact. But it's kind of another one of those weird City signings where they have a player that's clearly the first choice in the position, and they just go and sign another high-profile player there, and he kind of just is left there to rot because he can't get into the team. So I'm not sure. Maybe he just needs some time, and maybe they're trying to see if Kyle Walker is going to start tethering down a little bit. But yeah, as of right now, I couldn't argue with that choice if we went with Cancelo, because he really hasn't lived up to the price tag whatsoever.
All right then. Well, let's say Cancelo. Why not?
Let's just make a City 11 and leave it at that.
Yeah. So then left back, you got I'll throw one straight away. I'm gonna go for Man City again. I'm gonna go for Benjamin Mendy. I feel like I'm believing. Sorry?
I was gonna name Mendy too.
Oh well, there we go. That's unanimous. Just the price tag and the fact that he's just not really kicked on. Injuries have hampered him. I think he played 5 games total and won 3 competitions, or something like that, a couple of years ago in 2018. He's just not really as good as someone like Zinchenko has been for Man City, or even when they've played Cancelo at left back, he's sort of actually done better than Mendy. I think if you might remember the Wolves game when City were 2-1 up, Mendy makes an error and it makes it 2-2 because Traore just pounces on him and bounces him completely.
Yeah, he's kind of switched off there too in United's second goal in the derby. He's not really watching the ball, and he's kind of in no man's land when Ederson pings the ball out to him.
Yeah, exactly. He's just not quite there, and he kind of gets a lot of criticism for his use of social media. Something that even the manager has sort of said is sort of not good enough, but no one picks up on that. They only pick up on, I don't know, Paul Pogba, wearing a Juventus shirt to support Blaise Matuidi, and then that's picked up on, but nothing about Benjamin Mendy just sort of constantly on social media when Pep's told him not to.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I feel like the talent is definitely there. Like we saw in his beginnings for City, that his end product is pretty good, and he looked like he might be one of the best left backs in the league in a couple of seasons if he keeps going at that. But I think he was also unfortunate with the injuries, but he just kind of hasn't bounced back since. And I think overall, when you look at the whole thing with the social media stuff, which, like you said, never gets picked up unless it's a United player. It's kind of way more minuses to his name than pluses. And that I remember this one thing when I think he just got injured or something like that, and a journalist in the press conference asked Pep if he knows that he's like in Thailand or something like that, and Pep was like, "What? He is?" And he was like, "Yeah, he just posted on his Instagram that he's in Asia somewhere," and Pep was like, "Oh, I had no idea. I'm gonna have to talk to him about that." So that kind of tells you a lot about a player's character, I think, and personality when it comes to being coachable and stuff. So I think we have a unanimous pick here for left back.
Yeah, exactly. So then we'll go for 2 centre backs. Anyone you had in mind?
I'm having a look here at some names, and the first one kind of that stands out to me, and I think that might be a little controversial, would be Joe Gomez. I just don't think. Well, I as much as I do see the potential, I just don't think that he's all that what people make him out to be. And I feel like Liverpool's defensive record as a unit and the contributions of Van Dijk and Alisson just lift up a lot of their players without kind of merit, if you want to say that. And this is not to say that he's a bad player or that he won't go on to be great, but I just don't think that. I think playing alongside Van Dijk would make anyone look decent. Like Matip was looking very good at some points, and Lovren doesn't look good at all. But when Matip was playing alongside him, he was looking good. So I don't think if you take Joe Gomez out of that Liverpool defense, they lose at all. But if you take out Van Dijk and leave Gomez to lead the line, I just don't think that he's quite there yet, and he gets quite a lot of praise because I think mostly because he's English probably in the press, but I just don't think he's quite at that level yet where he can be classified as a world class centre back.
Right. Well, there are obviously tips for him to be alongside Harry Maguire for England whenever the Euros do come. So do you disagree with that, or do you think that there is someone sort of better in England that should go alongside Maguire?
I think they don't have that many options, especially with how Southgate wants to play. I think another option could be John Stones, but he might be my other pick alongside of him because he just hasn't lived up to the billing since moving from Everton at all. So, but I do think there are different. Like Joe Gomez isn't the be all end all. I really like the look of Lewis Dunk at Brighton as a central defender, and so I think there are options there. But I do feel like international managers tend to sway with players who play for big clubs, especially. So I don't think it would be a terrible partnership because they're both ball playing, they're both solid defenders, but I just don't think that he is all that at the moment.
Okay, well, can't disagree with that. I've got a couple names as well. Just consider. First one being Nathan Ake. Bournemouth wanted him from Chelsea. Chelsea sort of were kind of slightly reluctant to let him go, but he wanted more first team appearances, and they finally let him go for a fee around 20 to 25 million pounds. He's supposed to be this huge leader. He's supposed to be kind of very composed on the ball, supposed to do really well in attacking football. And Bournemouth's clean sheet rate is pretty dreadful. I don't think they've got more than 4 this season. And he's definitely not shone in this side where there are kind of limited kind of world-class defenders or kind of huge prospects and things in the back line, with the defence being pretty similar from the side that came up from the Championship a few years ago. So I don't think he's really kind of kicked on at Bournemouth, and probably would have been better at Chelsea, all things considered, right now.
Yeah, well, I can't disagree that he hasn't been having a great season, but I do think that he's pretty good, and I think that if he was at a better team, maybe like the likes of Gomez, he would look better. But if he had just a more of a compact side to play around him, whereas Bournemouth haven't had a fantastic situation this season, they've been struggling for the first time in years, for the first time probably since getting promoted. They've been in and around that relegation battle, and it's just kind of, I feel like that's kind of his first season where he's under a lot of pressure. And I've seen a couple of highlights that he was captain and stuff like that. So maybe it's just kind of a transition period from being that good player to becoming a very good player. But can't disagree that it's definitely been an underwhelming season, especially with the links that he had in the summer to, like you said, bigger moves. So it's definitely, if the season resumes, there's going to be a lot of pressure on his shoulders to finish it off strong, to try keep Bournemouth up and to try kind of keep his reputation high going into the transfer window, because he's getting to that age where he might want to look for a bigger move sooner rather than later. And yeah, if he doesn't kind of step up and solidify that Bournemouth defense, then he has every right to have that overrated tag on his name.
Yeah, I do have 2 other names just to put in, and they're actually both from the same team. Toby Alderweireld and Jan Vertonghen, who both looking for, well, one's just signed a new contract at Spurs, but the other is kind of half in, half out the door, really, with Ajax interested. But both are supposed to be world-class defenders and were sort of really, really important in the Champions League matches last season, and Tottenham's sort of race for top 4, just about making it as well. And they've just dipped so much in the last 12 months. And Tottenham have been so leaky because their form has been pretty poor. Do you think they deserve the kind of world-class plaudits they've been getting?
I feel like Vertonghen more than Alderweireld is the one that has depreciated a lot. I feel like Alderweireld still offers a lot, and he's kind of been able to maintain that high level more than Vertonghen. And Vertonghen has had some controversial conflicts off the pitch too, which I don't think help at all ever to a players. But yeah, I think it's at first we kind of thought that maybe the team had burned out under Pochettino and they needed a change, and that maybe they would get back on the right tracks, but it hasn't looked at all better under Jose since he has come in. And you would have thought initially that when Mourinho comes in, he kind of makes that defense tick and he shores up whatever leaks there are there, and he just hasn't been able to do that. So perhaps, I don't know if overrated maybe is the right thing for both of them, but they're both just kind of just getting older. They're both over 30, and I think maybe it's just that time in their careers where their value and their quality has just depreciated. But I think they're still regarded as very good defenders, and with that label comes some sort of expectations. And if they're not reaching them, then I don't think people would argue if you put either of them in a most overrated 11, especially for this season. But I would feel like Vertonghen would edge it for me over Alderweireld.
Right. So who would you put in then? Just concluding. How would you go? So Joe Gomez is definitely in the mix, and then
also like to throw in one name.
Yeah.
I'd like to throw in Otamendi.
Yes. Yeah.
I just feel like maybe I'm biased, but I just don't see it at all. I feel like he's hot-headed. He has that a bad tackle in him, and I just feel like he makes a lot of mistakes. He's another one of those players that is just purely good on the ball, and that's the only reason he gets in that City team, because on defending alone, I don't think he makes that starting 11 whatsoever, and I just haven't really seen it since he has joined City, and I don't think he's ever been in the conversation for being one of the better centre backs in England, let alone beyond that. So I just feel like even if he doesn't make our 11, he deserves to have an honourable mention.
No, I think the thing with Otamendi is it's a lot like the situation with Gomez and Van Dijk. I think Otamendi looked good when he was alongside Laporte. He looked good alongside Kompany. Stones looked good alongside Kompany and Laporte. It's just when the two, like when Matip and Lovren, or Matip and Gomez mix, or Lovren and Gomez mix, it just doesn't really work. And so you get that kind of issue. And I think Otamendi's sort of he'd be a very, very good defender in Spain or in Italy, where you can just be that kind of raw defender and you don't need to kind of just sort of, you're not constantly being bullied by the centre forwards that you are really in England, because it is a much more aggressive game. And I think he kind of be able to be the more aggressive person in a different league, or maybe kind of a smaller club. I don't even know. But he just seems to be constantly in the spotlight and then constantly getting punished for his errors. And he just he was supposed to be like a wall last season. He was a wall. I think that's what they called him, the Man City fans anyway. And he's just sort of completely fallen apart really this season. And maybe it's just due to Laporte, but maybe it's due to him kind of getting older. But either way, he's just not the same player that's been kind of one of the best in inverted commas. But yeah, I can definitely see Otamendi being on there. So do you think he's your first name?
I think I would actually put him in there over Gomez. Yeah.
What? So Otamendi and
Vertonghen for me.
Yep.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. So should we do a 4-3-3 formation then? Or
so you want 3 central midfielders?
Yeah, and then a right winger, left winger, and just out and out striker. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Does that sound all right? So yeah, then midfield 3. Any names? Start off.
I'm just gonna throw it out there, and I will take the heat for it. But Jordan Henderson would lead the line for me, and I can never get that clip of him against Croatia for England out of my head. I don't know if you've seen it on Twitter circling around.
Yes.
It's a fantastic piece of work, and I think it just kind of it just describes Henderson as it is, and I just don't think he's a quality footballer. I just think Liverpool, because they're so effective, they get away with playing long ball a lot. And Henderson he thrives when he can just lump one long and have quick players to get on the end of it. And I feel like that's just really it. He's never really in under pressure situations because of how Liverpool press, so he never has to look up and pick out smart passes. He can get away when he's deep with playing sideways and giving it to the quick fullbacks, or just lumping one over the top to Mane or Salah to chase down. I think that's pretty much it. And he might have fantastic leadership qualities, and that's why he's the Liverpool captain. He can make them tick, and credit him for that if he does so. But as a footballer, and I think we're just talking on footballing ability here, I just don't see it. And I'm hearing that he might be in the running for player of the season this season, and I would just be, if you look at the players that have won it in recent years with the likes of Hazard and Mahrez and their stats, if Henderson wins player of the season, then I think I will be switching over to supporting my local club in one of the lower divisions.
Yeah, I can't. To be fair, if he is player of the season, that is a massive shock. But I have always, I'm gonna have to disagree with you a little bit here because I've always quite liked Henderson. Even when he was like just starting off at Liverpool, I did kind of always quite like his sort of energy and aggression and whatever. Um, and even sort of the goal. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember in the 2015 season when uh, Liverpool scored two absolutely crackers against City. Henderson scoring one and Coutinho the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of when it sort of kind of said, oh well, Henderson, he's sort of a pretty decent player and he's going to be quite good. And then kind of as it went on, he's just sort of a very aggressive, kind of high pressing player. He just works in the system that Liverpool have. And I think you're right. I think maybe in a different system, would he be the same kind of player? And you have to sort of say no. But in the current situation where England are at, where the holding midfielders are very, very rare, you've got kind of really just Harry Winks, Henderson, and Declan Rice. And really, you've got to say Henderson is the one shoo-in in that team. He is sort of he's going to be a very important player in England's any kind of Euro success because he is going to have to be controlling the tempo for them. So I do disagree with that, but I kind of do understand where you're coming at, but he's not world class. He's not world class. He's not player of the year. He's just very good and very important when he needs to be, but he has to be that important player, which obviously against Croatia he really wasn't. So yeah.
So I just want to touch on what you said because I completely I take your point and I agree with what you said in terms of he is the perfect player for Liverpool and their system and how they play, and there's no denying that he's been having a good season and he perhaps looks more effective because of that system where he gets a lot of time on the ball and he can pick out his long balls, and more often than not they're successful because of the pace of their players and just how drilled in that system is. But also, like you mentioned, I feel like if you take him out and put him into any other side, he might not necessarily work. And I don't think, like we've seen, well, I'm not English or an England fan, but I've been watching their games because I follow the Premier League, and I think we've seen quite a few times that he is not the perfect pivot and kind of sitting player for how Southgate wants to play, because Southgate doesn't really base his team of playing long diagonals and running in behind. I think he would prefer a possession-based style. And I think sometimes he might be the weakest link for England because he is not one of those players that will bring the ball out and push the pace and pick out a clever pass in between the lines. So I just feel like he's a little bit one-dimensional, but I do give him credit for what you mentioned and for what you appreciate about him as a player, the leadership, the aggressiveness, what he brings to the team. Sometimes it's irreplaceable. And I feel like if you take him out of this particular Liverpool side, they're a different team because he's kind of the heart of that whole operation. But I think overall and the plaudits that he gets, and I feel like he could get exposed if he was just plucked out and put into a different midfield.
I do agree with that actually, yeah. Let's leave them in the mix, and then let's go on to some more players. I'm gonna raise one now. I'm gonna go for another Liverpool player actually, Naby Keita.
Yeah.
I think he was bought for around 42 million in the end. There were fees from 30s to 70s, kind of put out there. But I think overall, because of what happened with that Leipzig team, he did actually end up going for 42 million, which is still a lot of money for someone who's made as little appearances and contributions as he has. Injuries have, of course, ruined his first few seasons. But even while he was injured, people were saying he's going to be better than Paul Pogba or make more contributions than Paul Pogba and whatever. And he just hasn't done anything really of note. And I think even Klopp's getting a bit frustrated with him, with his inability to kind of stay fit for long periods in the season and even make an impact off the bench. So he's got to be kind of really kind of overrated based on what Liverpool have said and what the fee was and everything else considered.
I do agree with that, and it's funny because Liverpool fans will fight you to the death and tell you that he's quality, but What I want to say is, show me, then show us where. Because this could be a similar situation to what happened to Fred with United, where he just needs time. And fair enough. But when you come in for that sort of money, you're expected. And Fred was getting stick for it. And I'm sure if we had this conversation even last year, we could have named Fred in the most overrated 11. But right now, he's just not doing it. He's not showing you what you expect of a 40+ million player. And I can't disagree with anything that you said, because one, the price tag, two, the hype that he came in with, people were, like you said, putting him up against Pogba and stuff like that, which is crazy, having just come from Leipzig. So yeah, I agree with that, and I think I can't like take him out of it, because you have to put in players into underrated and overrated 11s on merit, and he just hasn't earned the status of a good, reliable Premier League player, but one maybe because of injuries and stuff like that. But everything combined, all the variables, he just hasn't been doing it for the money that he was brought in for.
100%, yeah. Well, he's got to be first person, definitely on this list. You got any other names to raise?
So I'm feeling controversial today. So I want to throw Declan Rice into the mix, okay. And this is purely because of how much he is being allegedly listed for, and how much maybe teams are gonna have to pay up if they want to take him away. And I just feel like he's a carbon copy of Henderson. Maybe a little bit better defensively and not as good going forward or just distributing the ball. But I just feel like he's one of those examples of an English player that just comes out, makes a little bit of noise, and he's all of a sudden the best player in the world, like the media love to do. And this is the point of the whole thing, right? How media kind of treat the players, and they treat Declan Rice like he's prime Makelele for some reason. So, and again, I'd like to just underline that me saying they're overrated doesn't mean they're bad footballers. I just don't think they have as much about them as maybe is indicated. And I just feel like Rice works in a system, and still in that West Ham team, he's not exactly a world beater, and West Ham leak a lot of goals, and their midfield isn't probably one of their stronger aspects. And you would expect that to be with how much praise he gets as one of their like main stalwarts in midfield. So I feel like overall he has a little bit too much hype thrown on him in the early days, and in a team that maybe is a very attacking based and is winning, and he's one of the players that you leave behind that's in front of the back four, he will work and he will prove his worth. But as of right now, I just feel like he hasn't really proved all that much to me overall as a footballer. And I don't think, like you said, in the running for that spot in the England team, he doesn't beat out Henderson for me. So I feel like all things considered, he would be slightly overrated for me.
Yeah, actually, I can't really disagree with that at all. I think that's another player that just has to go in alongside Keita. I'm gonna argue Jordan Henderson, I'm afraid, but I'm gonna put in a fair fight. I'm gonna put in Mesut Ozil.
I have another alternative for you after too, if you want.
Yeah. Let's keep this going. But yeah, Mesut Ozil's one that I do have to say, because I think even under the kind of what you could say bounce back that Arsenal had in the late sort of stages of the season with Arteta, he was still pretty bang average, and it was really sort of Pepe getting a bit better, but not really. But Ceballos getting better, and Xhaka playing a bit better, and obviously Aubameyang and Lacazette and Nketiah playing a lot better. But he was sort of just about, and even though he kind of, it's just the fact that he still makes like 350,000 a week to kind of just play a few forward passes, which really anyone in his position could do. And I just think that his quality has just really dipped, and his attitude is just not good enough. And that's something that never gets spoken about. Again, the fact that he like kicks bottles and gloves and stuff when he gets subbed off, because he's supposed to be like their best player, and he's just no longer their best player anymore. And it just sort of, it never gets mentioned. I think that's why he's there.
Would it be fair to say that his performance levels have been Jesse Lingard, but without the social media?
Absolutely, yeah, and more attitude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because I totally agree with you, and I feel like if we were doing the same thing but for most overrated 11 of the last 5 years, I think he could make a solid shout to be in it too, because I just don't think Arsenal were ever that good when he was there. They had that one fluky second place finish because Tottenham choked it in the title race against Leicester. But other than that, he came in as one of the wonder boys from Real Madrid that I believe they were in the Champions League final with him. I can't remember. And but he was there under Mourinho, having the best season of his career. And he came into Arsenal, and he just never, like you said, in the position that he is in, he plays a lot of passes. He's a creative player, and he was getting some decent assist numbers at some points, but he was never really that leader that Arsenal expected him to be, to kind of lead the team and be the best player and lead by example. He just never has been, and Arsenal have been pretty average over the last 5 years with their 4th, 5th, 6th placed finishes. And I think he hasn't done enough to warrant the label of being one of the better players in the league, and especially in the last couple of years, like you said, he's been throwing up fusses, and his performances have not been backing up the kind of attitude that he has been showing of one of the world's best players, because it just hasn't been that. So I couldn't argue with you there.
Right, so what were your names you were going to throw in?
I was going to say Dele Alli. I think I was going to say, is it time to start looking at him as a little bit overrated, or is it too soon? Because I feel like after that first maybe season and a half for Spurs, he's really deteriorated in terms of performances, and he was pretty bad over the last 18 months, I think, until Pochettino got sacked and Mourinho came in and kind of gave him a little bit of a revival. But the revival also came with all those injuries coming in, where he was, if he didn't score, there was literally nobody there for Tottenham to score. But he has shown bits of class and bits of what's there again with that goal against United, for example, and stuff like that. So there's no argument that he has all the talent and that he could still be a great player, because he's still quite young. But is it time maybe to start saying that he is a little bit overrated to what he gets credit for?
Yeah, I actually can't disagree, because I remember maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago, he was sort of rated around 100 million going to Real Madrid, kind of replacing kind of Modric in that midfield or whatever. And you'd have to say Modric has actually kind of still kept that place, really. And even Valverde's sort of come in and done a decent job and sort of making actually a difference. Whereas Ali's he doesn't really press that much. He's sort of very sluggish, and he's sort of more of a target man at this point, really. In the season anyway, sort of ended up acting like a striker, really, at times, and bringing players in, and it's not really kind of done as well as you'd expect when he had almost a 20 goal haul a couple seasons ago. So yeah, I do agree. It's just whether he's sort of, it's between him, Ozil, and Henderson, and I'll let you make that decision.
So who do you think is the first is Keita and
Declan Rice.
Okay. Well, I think on the grand scheme of things, and I want to kind of I accept your argument, and I do see Henderson as how he fits to that Liverpool team and what he brings. So I think I'm gonna go with overall the whole picture with Ozil, because I just don't think it gets talked about at all, especially for the amount of stick us coming from a United side, Pereira and Lingard get. Has Ozil been better at all over the last 12 months? Because I don't think so.
No, at least Lingard and Pereira do actually kind of care about the club in that sense. You could say that, at least that much. Whereas Ozil sort of seems like he's playing for himself, really.
I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
A solid midfield right there.
Yeah. Oh dear. All right. Well, let's go for the wingers then. You got anyone to kick us off with?
So I'd like to throw in. I don't know if he's going to make the whole team because of the status of the club, but Felipe Anderson from West Ham.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I feel like even I'm guilty of it too when he was coming in from Lazio, and again he's one of the players that United get linked with before he signed for West Ham. I just don't think he has done it at all, anywhere near the level that maybe people were expecting him to, and he was coming in kind of as that focal point of West Ham to replace Payet, and it just hasn't really clicked for him. And that could be West Ham could be guilty of that because of just how bad they have been as a football club in terms of everything on and off the pitch ever since kind of Payet left. And that Slaven Bilic era ended, like they kind of just collapsed and just have been barely surviving. They even had to recall David Moyes to save them again. So that just kind of shows you where they're at right now. But I think great players stand out even when they're playing for smaller clubs, and they kind of carry them and propel them to another level. Like Payet, he was kind of one of the best players in the league, even though West Ham weren't by no means fantastic. It was just kind of him and everyone else, and he led them to a top 10 finish. So I think great players still play great, even with terrible players around them. And kind of Mahrez is a good example of that too, whereas Leicester elevated themselves to his level, and then he got his big move. So yeah, I think if Anderson doesn't make it because we have better contenders, he's definitely deserves to be on the list because he just hasn't shown me enough in his time in the Prem.
Yeah, I've really kind of got not many that are kind of higher on that list than him, really. So I think that's a very good shout. I've got Nicola Pepe, but I think that was sort of the obvious one. And then I was thinking about Mo Salah, but then I think just the amount of goals he gets sort of warrants his. But it's just the fact that he kind of gets the world class thing. I just don't think he is actually world class. But I think really Anderson. I didn't even think about Anderson. That was a really good shout. But and I think for me it's him and Pepe really. Unless you have anyone else you want to throw into the mix.
So I'm kind of just browsing through a list to have a look, and I feel like maybe, even though it's early days and I don't want to do that because he's a young player, but with all the fuss that happened over Callum Hudson-Odoi in the summer and that big move that he was about to make to Bayern and stuff like that, and he wouldn't sign his contract, and I just feel like he hasn't. Injuries obviously played a part too, as they usually do with kind of hyped up players and stuff like that, but. I just don't think he has quite he hasn't showed us anything this season really, because one, he was recovering from an injury, and then he wasn't really getting that many looks in Lampard's team, even with Pulisic injured, who I think is another one that could go in there for the price tag that he came in for. He's been injured too, and except for that hat-trick that he scored against Burnley, he hasn't really shown me all that much. To show as to how he could be one of Chelsea's leader moving forward. So I think I don't really want to do it to Hudson-Odoi because I hold a sentiment for young players that get overhyped, especially he's still under 20, and that could happen to anyone except who's not called Mason Greenwood, who just lives up to the hype.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I'm going to let Hudson-Odoi off because of the injuries, and I will throw Pulisic in there because I just don't think he has lived up to the price tag whatsoever. And he was benched by Sancho at Dortmund. That's why he came to England, and he just hasn't really found his feet or proved as to why he deserved to play in Dortmund in the first place. So, and now he's injured. So I think I would like to throw him in the mix too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think Anderson's sort of a really, really kind of big name, and I think even just because the fact where West Ham are and where he was for them last season, I think it's huge that he's there. He's not even trying. I think he scored 1, maybe 2 goals this season, if that, and it's just not even close to what he was like the season before. Yeah, he scored 1 goal and got 1 assist in 22 games. It's pretty poor, but it's gone to the level where they had to sign Jared Bowen from Hull. So yeah, I mean that's as good as it gets really. But as for the other one, yeah, I think it's a coin toss between Pepe and Pulisic. So
I have one more for you if you want to make it a triple threat. I was just doing some quick research.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Iwobi to Everton for £34 million.
Oh yeah, no, that's just not gone well at all.
My first question is, what warrants that price tag? And then my second question is, he hasn't done anything for Everton really. I don't think he's scored yet. I'm not hearing him making many assists. I just feel like I think he's getting by on the fact that he's JJ Okocha's relative and that he still has some sort of a. Maybe people think that he has a higher ceiling because he's still one of the younger players, but I just don't think he has ever been since his debut for Arsenal. Kind of one of the players that you look for and you say, oh, he might be one of the best in the future. He's not really that quick. He's technically sound, but I feel like most players are technically sound these days. And especially when it comes to the Premier League, the wide players are really important and are really some of the best in Europe. And £34 million is it's no spare change when it comes to splashing the cash for a footballer. And I was kind of surprised when that came about from Everton because I just don't see how he fits what they're trying to do and how he is one of the high-profile signings that can take them forward. So I think he could get on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that's actually a very good point. I think the fact that I think the fact that Pepe has actually kind of done a lot better than Iwobi would have done in the circumstance. I think that sort of means that Iwobi gets pushed up the overrated list a lot more than Pepe, because Pepe has actually shown signs of brilliance, whereas Iwobi's just sort of been running about like a headless chicken, really. And he's only got one goal in 22 or something games, and just basically where Everton are is just not good enough. And he was supposed to be kind of an important player and just hasn't lived up to it. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think with Pepe actually shows glimpses that he could be good, and he's quick, and he's got quick feet. He has a nice left foot, whereas Iwobi just kind of really has been stagnant for the past few years.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, so should we say Iwobi and Anderson, or
I'm down. I'm cool with that.
Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. So we'll go for the striker then. Anyone that immediately springs to mind?
I think just off this season, Lacazette. And that's because that's just off this season because I'm a fan of his overall. And if Arsenal were shopping him, I would take him at United in a heartbeat because I feel like there's a great player in there. But other than his injuries this season, I just don't think he's been doing it. And the stats show it. He's been on goal droughts. He scored I think a couple of weeks before the quarantine, he scored a fluky goal that kind of bounced off his other foot after taking the shot. And I think just for his name and for the kind of higher profile that he's built himself over the years, I think he's just he hasn't lived up to the billing this season, and definitely not helped Aubameyang in the slightest, who has been carrying that sinking ship all season.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think he's been sort of struggling for goals, and he has got a lot of class in him, and I think maybe the £50 million transfer fee was quite a lot when you consider how much Aubameyang actually came for, which is I think maybe 10 million more. But I still think there is sort of a good quality player. I think the fact that he is being asked to sort of work a lot harder is sort of changing his game a bit, and so he's sort of in that kind of transition period, I guess. Whereas he was basically just an out-and-out goal scorer when he first came in under Wenger. So we will see next season we'll see if he can actually kick on or if he's just going to go further downhill. But
I think that's the beauty of the French league, because I feel like if anyone was to poach Moussa Dembele from Lyon, he would be around that price tag too. And that's not his fault. It's just kind of the league's kind of fault that it inflates the quality and value of players just because the league isn't fantastic and offensive players can really stand out.
No, absolutely, yeah. It does sort of mean that most players that kind of come out of there just end up kind of struggling a little bit to start with because they're not kind of used to a bit higher quality in the kind of lower level clubs in the league. Because realistically, about 10 or even 12 of the clubs in France are pretty poor quality. And so, yeah, it just makes that. And that's why Memphis Depay probably gets a little bit more, a few more glances than he kind of did at United and PSV, really.
I feel like Depay has kind of gone back to the level of hype that he had around him in PSV. He's a very good player, and in the league where defenses don't really stand out, he's kind of showing that he has goals in him and he has tricks in him, and he's a very good player. But I just feel like United was maybe a little too early for him, and it's just the level of competition, the physicality, the speed is just a little maybe too much.
Absolutely, yeah. I think he got bullied quite a bit. But maybe kind of, would you take him back? Just on a side note, would you take him back?
I have a sentiment for United players. I'd actually take Januzaj back too. I've seen he's been playing very good recently. but I don't think I just don't think Memphis suits the Premier League. So I don't think he would be my first option right now if we had the buyback clause. I think I would rather have a few options ahead of him. But I don't think he would be the worst player to come in, especially for depth. But I don't think I would jump at the chance of re-signing him.
Mm-hmm. No, fair enough. So yeah, going back to the 11, I do have a name to throw into the mix, and it is Gabriel Jesus, who, while he does get the goals, I think it's all about everybody else in that team making those goals, because he is, well, you could say, a poacher is good. Aguero was a poacher, and Pep made him work really, really hard to be something other than that, and he still bangs in about 20 to 30 goals a season in all competitions. Whereas Jesus gets the goals, but he gets the goals just by standing in the middle of the 6-yard box and tapping them in. You don't see him scoring kind of really, really class finishes, like one-on-ones. He misses them all. Penalties, he misses more than his fair share. And it's literally just tap-ins and headers and sweaties and things like that. You never see him do anything kind of amazing. And for the price tag he came in for, it just doesn't seem like he warrants all the hype he gets.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm just looking at stats here now, and both Martial and Rashford have more goals than him in the Premier League, and you kind of wouldn't really sense that by how little criticism he gets for what he's been in England now for 3-4 years.
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree with you, and yeah, it's easy to be a fox in the box in a team like City, because I've heard it talked about a lot of times where you kind of know the exact goal. Like if you think of Man City, you know the goal that they score, like that long ball down the wing and just a drilled ball into the box, and somebody is there to tuck it away. I feel like I'd score 5 Premier League goals for City if I was just standing there up front. Yeah. So yeah, I think with, like you said, with all the hype that he gets and the kind of Brazilian wonder kid label that he still carries to his name, he just doesn't show the overall striker qualities like Aguero shows. Like you said, like Aguero he will stand in the box and get those finishes, but he also scores worldies pretty much every week when he plays. He'll score from outside the box on his weak foot, left foot. He wins headers. So yeah, I feel like he is ways away from being that kind of a striker, and I feel like from all the comparisons that he's been getting with Rashford, ever since Rashford debuted, really, because they kind of came onto the scene at the same time, Rashford has kind of just ran away from him this season completely, and he hasn't played in 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, unless you got another name at all, or should we just...
So I was just thinking, but I don't really know if you could call him overrated at this point, but Benteke from Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I just think he's just very bad.
Yeah, I think it's gone past the stage where he can be called overrated. I think that couple of seasons at Villa was great with that Route 1 stuff, and then it just all went downhill from him there. So I think he has solidified himself as a bad player that we can't no longer put him in this category. But it was just kind of a name that I had on the top of my head.
Yeah, I do. There is actually someone, another Belgian striker, Divock Origi, who gets sort of super sub touted for super sub, and kind of like, how we sort of thought of Hernandez and Solskjaer. He just basically gets like that for Liverpool, and he's very, very, he's a very okay striker, and really he's sort of only when Firmino, he doesn't get ahead of Firmino really, and when he does go ahead of Firmino in like starting matches, he doesn't actually make a difference. So I just think he gets a bit of hype, but then again, I still think he comes up with the goods when Liverpool need him to. So I wouldn't really factor him in, but just something to consider.
I feel like when we're talking about if we kind of put him up in the against Jesus head to head, I feel like most teams would rather throw Origi in there because of being a little more physical, and like you said, in the big moments when he has been asked to take over, he has been able to produce, whereas we haven't really seen a consistent spell of Jesus really carrying that City team. Even though they kind of work the goals for you, easy to score, he hasn't really had that spell in the team as the number one forward to see kind of how good he is. And when he comes off the bench, I just don't really think he makes that much of an impact all that much. So, and City rarely find themselves in the situations where they need somebody to come off the bench to make an impact. So I feel like, if anything, Jesus would be a little higher on that list for me over Origi.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. Yeah. So yeah, I guess we have our 11. Kepa in goal. Cancelo, Otamendi, Vertonghen, and Mendy in defence. Then Rice, Keita, Ozil in midfield. And Iwobi, Felipe Anderson, and Jesus up front.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah. That's a pretty overrated team. Where would that team finish in the Premier League, would you say?
It's a very good question, because on paper there are some very good players there, but if they're playing like they're playing individually, some of them this season, and then the likes of Declan Rice with Ozil in a midfield three, I just don't think that works. So I think they could still finish mid-table, but for the names that are there, I think they would be expected to finish a little higher.
No, absolutely. That is then all we have time for this week. Thank you for listening, and thank you for Arian for joining me. Next week we will be looking at what should happen with the Premier League with Jason coming back on, and then the week after we will be looking at the underrated 11. If you do have any questions or any topics you would like for us to cover, then please comment below on the video or on the Twitter or Facebook post. And if you enjoyed this, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on Twitter for all of our content.